In the darkness of the Egyptian prison, where the shadows of oblivion stretched across the cold walls, Joseph continued to live with hope and faith. Although unjustly imprisoned, his heart was not overwhelmed by bitterness. On the contrary, within his heart was a light that could not be extinguished. God was with him. One day, 2 new prisoners were brought to the prison, the chief cupbearer of Pharaoh and the chief baker. They had been accused of crimes against Pharaoh and were thrown into the same prison where Joseph was. God was with Joseph and gave him wisdom and understanding, so the guards entrusted him with the care of these 2 men. He did not see them as mere prisoners, but as souls who deserved compassion and attention. One night, both the cupbearer and the baker had dreams that troubled them. When Joseph saw them the next day, he noticed their anxious faces and asked,
"Why are your faces sad today?"
They answered him,
"We dreamed dreams, and there is no one to interpret them."
Joseph, with a calm voice, said,
"Interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dreams."
The chief cupbearer spoke first.
"I dreamed that before me stood a vine with 3 branches. They budded, blossomed, and grew ripe grapes. I held Pharaoh's cup in my hand, squeezed the grapes into the cup, and gave it to Pharaoh."
Joseph listened carefully, then with confidence said,
"This is the interpretation. The 3 branches represent 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position, and you will again give Pharaoh his cup as you did before. But please, when it is well with you, remember me. Mention me before Pharaoh and help me get out of this prison. I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here I have done nothing to deserve being put in this prison."
Encouraged by the good interpretation of the cupbearer's dream, the chief baker told his dream.
"I dreamed that on my head I had 3 baskets of white bread. In the top basket were baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds came and ate from the basket on my head."
Joseph, with a heavy heart, said,
"This is the interpretation. The 3 baskets represent 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will order your head to be lifted off, and you will be hanged on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh."
Exactly 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, a great feast was held. Pharaoh remembered the cupbearer and the baker. He restored the cupbearer to his position, while the baker was hanged, just as Joseph had interpreted. But the cupbearer forgot Joseph. Despite his promise, he did not remember him. Joseph remained in prison, but not forgotten by God. In the silence of his cell, where human memory weakened, God's providence was alive and at work. This story teaches us the importance of trusting in God's plan, even when people forget us. Joseph, a man of unshakable faith, remained patient, knowing that God never forgets. Even when the prison doors were shut, the heavenly doors remained open for his hope and prayers. His humility, compassion, and wisdom shone like a light in the darkness. Though forgotten by man, Joseph was prepared for the great role God was preparing for him. This story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, God weaves our destiny with invisible threads of hope and salvation. Thus ends this phase of Joseph's life, but his story is far from over. His patience will be rewarded, and his faith exalted. For those who are faithful in small things, God elevates them to great things. When Joseph was summoned to stand before Pharaoh in Egypt, he was only 30 years old. His path from the prison cell to Pharaoh's court was a long one, filled with much suffering, but also with many blessings from God. Over the years, Joseph had learned many valuable lessons, both about life and about God's providence. At the moment Joseph stood before Pharaoh, he was not only young but also experienced and knowledgeable about how to manage large quantities of resources. Pharaoh chose Joseph not only because of his interpretation of the dream, but also because of his wisdom and strategy that would help Egypt prepare for a coming period of famine. This moment was not only a highlight for Joseph, but also for the entire land of Egypt, as his wisdom during the years of abundance would determine the fate of all Egyptians. Joseph's wisdom, preparing for years of famine. The first thing Joseph advised Pharaoh was to prepare for years of famine. He suggested that they store large quantities of grain during the years of plenty, when prices were lower and the land was fruitful.
Buy grain while it is cheap,
Joseph said.
and store it for the time when famine will come.
This advice was not only practical but also spiritual. He spoke about the importance of long-term perspective, how we should think about the future even when we have prosperity now. This advice proved to be crucial, as when the years of famine arrived, Egypt was prepared to face the challenge. At that time, many other nations were struggling with the famine, but Egypt was blessed because they had enough grain. As the situation progressed, all the surrounding nations began to come to Egypt to buy food, choosing officials and protecting the people. The next important piece of advice Joseph gave to Pharaoh was to appoint administrators and one person who would be responsible for the storage and distribution of the grain. He recommended this strategy because, as he put it,
What is in everyone's hands is in no one's hands.
without centralizing this task, little would be accomplished because, as Joseph pointed out,
If no one is appointed to manage this process, no work will be done.
this advice was precise and full of wisdom, as in those times of great famine, fragmented and disorganized authority would not have been able to provide a fair distribution of resources. Joseph's appointment was right and timely for the moment when strength and wisdom were required. God's providence, the abundance and blessings of God's gifts. Joseph not only fulfilled his task with faithfulness, but he also saw God's providence in every moment as his guide. When God blessed the land of Egypt with years of abundance, Joseph saw God's hand in it and used every moment to store and gather. His faith and trust in God were the foundation of his success. While from the outside it may have seemed like success and management, Joseph knew that every success was not just his but God's. And so the 7 years of plenty passed, and Joseph made sure that the time when famine came would not be forgotten. True wisdom was not just in gathering when it was possible, but in managing it, distributing, controlling prices, and ensuring fairness to the people. The birth of Manasseh and Ephraim. During these significant events, Joseph also built his own family. His life in Egypt brought him 2 children, Manasseh and Ephraim, whose names carried deep significance for him. With the choice of names for his sons, Joseph expressed his feelings of God's mercy. The name Manasseh meant,
For God has made me forget my trouble and my father's house.
while Ephraim meant,
For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction.
these names were much more than mere labels. They were testimonies of God's providence in his life. Joseph felt his pains and sorrows, but he also noticed God's blessings that followed him. His sons were living witnesses to God's mercy, showing how not only was he forgotten in his land and family, but now he was in a position of great influence and blessing. Just as he labored for the salvation of Egypt, he was also blessed with a new family and a new life, the fulfillment of the prophecy and God's faithfulness. When the famine began, everything Joseph had predicted started to come true. In the land of Egypt, there was grain thanks to his management of the resources, but the famine had reached the entire world. All surrounding nations began to come to Egypt to buy grain, which gave Joseph the chance not only to save Egypt, but also all those in need. This period of hardship was a confirmation of the faith Joseph had in God's providence. Just as God had revealed it to him through the dream, so it came to pass, and every detail of his prophetic vision was fulfilled. It was precisely in the time of lack that the nations sought help from Egypt and Joseph, who had been appointed by God to be a savior of the world during that period of crisis.